Hello and welcome back to the Book, Business, and Brand Building Summit. I'm your host, Jesse Krieger. We're going strong on day 9. Appreciate all of you guys showing up to these back-to-back live broadcasts, and you won't be disappointed today. We have a very special guest, a longtime friend, a fellow freedom lover, the author, best-selling author of Suitcase Entrepreneur, also now a champion at Ultimate Frisbee, somebody who just had a TEDx talk go live this morning, going from strength to strength. Joining us here on the summit, let me welcome my good friend, Natalie Sisson. Natalie, how you doing?
I should be exhausted after all that. I'm really, really good. Thank you so much for that introduction. It's an exciting day and an exciting time for all of us authors.
Yeah, well, I mean, I know you're in the midst of traveling and speaking, and you had a period in time there where, as I like to say, the suitcase was unpacked, and you were sort of in one place for a little while after years and years on the road. How does it feel to be on the move again?
I'm not actually, little disclosure, I'm not actually enjoying my suitcase, which really surprised me, but it was probably pretty legit after 6 years, but I am enjoying traveling again and seeing friends and being in new places. So I guess that's the trade-off, and just getting used to it again after you said having about 9 or 10 months in one place, mainly unpacked. I think it's just getting back into the action.
So is there actually one suitcase, a particular suitcase
One
that is
suitcase. It's a Rimowa suitcase. Yeah. It's super lightweight. I've had it for about 4 or 5 years. It just keeps going strong. It weighs nothing. It's purple. It's shiny and a bit scuffed, and yeah, it's my one suitcase.
Do you do anything like slap a sticker from every country or city you've been on it, or?
I don't actually, but I should put my branding on it, the suitcase entrepreneur. Although that would make me think that somebody might steal it, like, oh, what does the suitcase entrepreneur have in their suitcase?
Yeah, right. If you're a bag check and you're like a fan, you'd have that moment of, do I lose my job, but get the Suitcase Entrepreneur suitcase. No, but in all seriousness, I'm really excited to have you because, really today, the sort of theme du jour is crowdfunding and different creative ways to make money, perhaps even before your book is written, in the publishing space, in the writing space. I know this is an area you have a lot of firsthand experience with, and maybe we can dive into, a few different aspects of how that all works. I know you've done now did you finish the campaign for your second book?
I did, yeah. So I'm happy to talk about both experiences using different platforms and how much kickstarting and crowdfunding has evolved, if that works for you.
Yeah, I mean, maybe let's start with, because I know a lot of people on the summit are familiar with Suitcase Entrepreneur, the book, and you yourself personally. Maybe you can take us back and talk about your thought process and how you went about putting together that book and doing the crowdfunding campaign, building up a readership, building up an audience and interacting with them throughout that process, leading up to self-publishing your first book.
Yeah, I'd love to. So I think it was 2013, and that year I'd put out my painted picture, which is like a vision for your life, and I said I'm going to have a #1 best-selling book, which I hadn't even written at the time. And I think it was a great motivation to put something out there publicly, because then you make it a reality. So a couple of months later, I found myself, and I always do this, I tie in things like my birthdays to actually getting something serious done. So it was my birthday when I started using, actually it was just before my birthday, a month before my birthday, I started a Kickstarter campaign. Now, I'd never ever used a crowdfunding site before, but I did my research and I figured Kickstarter had a really good reach. It had just become available to use in the US and UK, and I have a UK passport and bank account, so that was handy. And why I went with Kickstarter over some of the other platforms is I'd seen that other books, movies, documentaries, projects have been doing pretty well on it. So this is 2013, it was still relatively new then. But I also wanted to test whether this book was something that people even wanted me to write. And you know what that's like, Jesse, like it's no point in writing a book if nobody's going to read it. And a bit like what I'd learned about online business, if you can pre-sell something, it proves there's a market for it. It proves that people want it. It proves that it's going to be valuable. So it was a bit of a big deal to put it out there because it took about, I think, 2 weeks to run through the whole Kickstarter campaign, to really think about the message of my book, what I wanted it to be. who it was for. I even had to put together sort of what I thought the chapters would be. I think I came up with them on a plane and asked a stranger on my left, what do you think of these chapters? And then, of course, I had to do a video, and I was in Borneo at the time. So the video is not even that fancy. And looking back, I probably would have done a better job. But I had my iPhone. I had a fly land on my nose partway through it. I didn't have the best audio, but it was heartfelt, right? And it was talking about, you know, I really want this book to be written. I want people to create freedom in business and adventure in life. So here's how you can support it. And like any good crowdfunding campaign, if you can share the story and if people can resonate with that and see themselves in it and see the value, it's typically going to be, you know, a success, unless you completely miss the point. So as I said, it took about 2 weeks to get the campaign there. And then when I published it, I had exactly a month until my birthday. Do you want me to sort of talk through how it went from there, or the results of it, or what I found really interesting about it?
I would love that. Maybe even first, if you can give maybe a couple tips on what you learned in actually setting up and structuring the Kickstarter campaign itself. You know, for anybody that's out there considering doing crowdfunding, or if this is the first time you're hearing about crowdfunding, which in effect means, you know, raising money, people contributing for different tiers of prizes or copies of your book or services or experiences. It's not a loan. It's not something that's like a debt instrument. It's actually people voting with their dollars or with their currency to support your work, which may not even be created. So maybe you can just sort of outline what structure you gave to the campaign in order to incentivize people to get involved and get active. And then for sure want to hear the outcome.
Yeah, there was a good summary of crowdfunding. As you say, it's kind of our opportunity to invest in people's business or product or dream, but for a small sort of upfront fee, and then hopefully in return for a product or a service or an experience. So I looked pretty carefully at Seth Godin's campaign that had been done about 6 months before, which was obviously tremendously successful because it's Seth. I also looked at Danny Innes and a couple of other people who had published books, and I looked at their pledges. And essentially I just modeled off theirs. What would I be prepared to give away? What did I think fitted in with my audience and community? And of course, giving away copies of your books, both digitally and in print, is really smart. I also offered up an audio book because I knew in the future I'd do audio. And then it was just fun stuff like t-shirts to go along with it, packages of bundling more books, experiences like a half day with me or dinners or a spot at my masterminds. And I think it's really smart if you are putting together pledges to make it all revolve around what you already do. So not just your book, but is there something post your book that you're going to be doing? Can they be part of the book tour? Do they get personally signed autograph books? Will you expand that into a program or a course? And I know that's taking that further, but I think it's good to make it your stuff, not giving away somebody else's stuff, because at the end of the day, it's all about the message in the book.
Well, I think,
and then the levels.
Oh, go ahead.
Go for it. I was just going to say, I think the levels of things are important too. So you've got people who are just wanting to contribute, but they maybe don't want a book. There's often like the $5 high five or virtual hug, and then going up from there, 15, 30, 45, 90. You know, if you think about it, there's a certain price point at which people are not so willing to part with their dollars, and that's kind of anything over $99 initially. So anything you can get that get a lot of your books out in that first sort of tier of 0 to 100 is really good. And then it's the sky's the limit. So I think you get to play around and be creative and look at what's worked for other people and what you're capable of being able to give, and more importantly, deliver.
And what was the highest contribution tier that you had set up for Suitcase Entrepreneur?
I can't even remember. The great thing about Kickstarter is my project is still there, so you can actually go back and look at it. I just usually search on Kickstarter Suitcase Entrepreneur. So let me check that for you right now.
Sure, I can link that up afterwards too for the replay. But I'm curious, and even while you're pulling that up, I'll share that, you know, what you just said sort of speaks to the overall premise of the Book Business and Brand Building Summit, where, you know, if you're doing a Kickstarter and you have this vision for what you're going to be doing beyond the book. You mentioned, you know, dinners, joining a mastermind, taking part in a book tour, interactive experiences, training, and so forth, you know, that is tied to the ideas, the themes of the book, but actually expands on it and accordingly generates much more revenue than just say selling more and more books. So that's really the overarching purpose of this whole summit, is to show people the different ways in which you can use your book to really build your business and brand. And I think you're a great example of how that is done.
So the highest pledge was £716, which is $1,111. Goodness knows why that's such a random number. But yeah, and somebody did actually take one of those up. So that was the highest, and the lowest was starting at £5, which was like about $8 back then, although the pound has recently dropped thanks to Brexit. So yeah, I think it was a good mix of things. And in terms of the goal, what did I raise? Well, when I put it together, I thought, if I'm not going to go with a traditional publisher, and as a first-time author, you typically get, if you're lucky, around $5,000, $10,000 for a publisher. You can tell me whether that needs updating, but that's what I'd heard when I'd done my research. So I thought, well, if I want to self-publish, why don't I pay myself what I probably would have got through a publisher, but then have way more freedom to do whatever I needed with my own book. So I raised £6,021, which was just shy of 10,000 US dollars. I had 196 backers back the project, which was fantastic. It ended on my birthday, so it was a real high. And more importantly, Jesse, which I think is the key here, is I basically realized that after doing it, I had a built-in marketing platform. I had all this interest around my book that I never would have had. I had 196 plus people waiting and interested for it to come out. And I had now an opportunity to email those people plus my community as I was writing the book. So I hadn't written the book at all by then. So then I got to share like Instagram posts on me writing from places. I got to ask people to input for the cover. I got people pledged to be an editor, so they paid to be my editors, and now I had editors, which was kind of genius, I thought. And the whole thing sort of paid for itself. Plus, when it went live on Amazon, in that first day, I could email everybody saying, hey, here's your, they all got their copies in advance, but I could say, hey, it's now live. Do you mind sharing or leaving a review because you've already read it, because you were the first to get it? And I think that's what made it shoot to #1 in the first 24 hours, is that just all these people were hanging out waiting for it. And they'd been following the journey. And a lot of people afterwards told me they felt like they'd helped me write the book. And I just think that's really special. So I think that's where the success came.
I love that. And, it hits on every single level. Getting people engaged and activated during the writing process, even before the writing process, being able to have that back and forth I'm not saying that the people that backed you gave you direct input on what they wanted to see in the book, but it sounds like it was really helpful to have a feedback loop and grow that conversation, grow those relationships in the course of creating the book. And it sounds like it really paid off when the book actually comes out publicly available. You've already got close to 200 people that have copies of the book and have read it and can immediately go in and do reviews. And I can tell you from the publishing perspective that, getting a lot of reviews in a short amount of time helps, perhaps even more than driving 5 times that many book sales. So having that level of engagement and people jumping onto the Amazon page where the book is available and reviewing and giving personal testimony of what it was like to be a part of that book creation process with you certainly sounds like it paid off in a big way. So what was sort of the time span, if you could, from when you put up your Kickstarter campaign to the launch day of the book, which I guess includes actually writing?
So mid-February was when I started working on the campaign. I think I launched it around March 2nd or 3rd. It ended 30 days later on my birthday, 3rd of April. And I then got to work writing. So in about 3.5 months, I wrote my entire book. It was ready for all the people who pre-ordered by mid-July, which was a push, but great to have a goal like it. The other thing that Kickstarter taught me is that you now have set a public intention. Like in the pledges, I said, you will receive this book by August 2015. I also had a book tour that was starting 2 weeks before it. I launched at the World Domination Summit, which was a great way to have 130 people turn up to your book party because they were already in town for a conference. And then I went on a bit of a tour, which was fantastic. And then August, I believe it was 7th, it came out on Kindle and print on demand and as a Kindle version. So it was a pretty quick turnaround time. And that's the beauty of self-publishing, right? If you are up for it and if you are good with stuff, you can turn it around quite quickly. I'd say the longest process the writing was difficult and challenging, but the marketing of the book was happening from the minute that campaign started right through until after. And that's another key, I think, is actually marketing throughout.
Well, that's probably the part I love the most. But I've just, for everybody that's listening, really internalize that from February to August, in the span of 6 or 7 months, went from having an idea to create a book to getting $10,000 of people contributing and saying, I support your idea, getting hundreds of people on board, pre-order, pre-sale of the book, what have you, through to actually writing the book and then launching it and having over 100 people at your book launch party in person, also preceding a book tour. It doesn't have to be a years-long process, right? And
exactly.
in less than a year, going from initial idea to book is out and you're on the go supporting it. I mean, was that a game changer for you, Natalie, in terms of after August of that year? What was your experience of, how was it different to be you than January of that year, let's say?
I mean, it was fantastic because I'd always wanted to write a book, but I didn't necessarily have a book in mind. And so I'd been in business long enough by that stage, about 3 or 4 years, that I felt I finally had a message that I wanted to get out, and to be able to put it out there and do it all by myself with the help of my community was huge. And to have it that successful, a lot of self-published authors, as you know, typically don't sell more than 500 books. And I just ran the numbers the other day and I'm happy to share them with you. I got my virtual assistant to add them all up, because I will tell you that Amazon doesn't give you just total book sales. It gives you month by month for the last 3 months. So you went back through all of that, and there's been about 27,000 copies sold digitally and print, more digitally, which makes total sense because I always talk about digital. But I was just blown away by that. That was actually far more than I thought I sold. And that's in the last, 2.5, 3 years. But it's just so neat to think that the book has got into that many people's hands, or at least being downloaded to their Kindle. Whether they read it or not is up to them. But yeah, it's really exciting. And I think it's built my brand. From that book, I then created my course, the Freedom Plan. So for me, that was a total game changer. It's been my most successful program to date. And I started getting more speaking gigs. So I think just in general, it solidified and cemented my brand and also my credibility. And it made me step up a level as well.
I love that. And I definitely want to get into, how you ended up building out your business with the Freedom Plan and the mastermind work and the client work that you do, as well as your brand, the speaking. And now I know just this morning, and I'll link up before the end of this interview, your TEDx talk that just went live. So, if you just talk about somebody with the book, the business, and the brand, it's like the triumvirate right here with Natalie Sisson. So, how do you envision the relationship between Suitcase Entrepreneur, your book, which of course talks about having a lifestyle of travel and freedom, and the Freedom Plan, which is your associated training program? How did you envision that and go about creating the program and rolling that out? And what's the experience you've had? Sorry, it's a two-part question. Of engaging with people through a training program where, of course, you're going deeper with them than just from a crowdfunding campaign to writing a book.
Well, I think you've hit on it there with that great question. Is the book, once people started reading it, they went, this is great, but how do I get more from this book? So I've read it through, I understand it, I've implemented a lot, but have you got anything further that I can take this into a deeper level? And so they actually kind of gave me the idea to go, well, how can I break this down into a program with more advanced training, more depth that you just can't cover in a book, and that live component of coaching, resources, trainings, videos. So it was in part inspired by the book and also people's feedback from it.
And but from your own perspective, did you already know you wanted to create the Freedom Plan, the program, as you were working on the book, or was that something that came subsequently?
I didn't actually, but I think it came pretty quickly after, just as I started getting feedback from people. I knew I wanted a definitive program that really resonated with my community and was my body of work, that was my legacy to pass on. But I don't think it became clear until I really solidified the ideas in the book that I could take this further and I could expand on this more, and people need more than just a book. Even though it's a great resource, there's nothing that helps people more than actually actively live work and doing something, either as a group or just being able to run through something with you.
So maybe you can share, how did you structure the Freedom Plan when you first rolled it out? Was it like a live weekly interactive training, or was it something that was pre-recorded and then you could interact with people through a group or some other mechanism? Maybe you could just talk to so that people watching this get an idea of how to structure a training program that really builds on the ideas in their book.
Yeah, I literally took my book, which is broken into 3 acts, and I made those the 3 stages of the program. And then I looked at the chapters and went, okay, how could I expand on this more? Is this a program in its own right? So essentially, it almost is like the book that's come to life. And I actually, before I even did anything, I pre-sold it once again through a pilot. So I put it out to a small group of people that I thought be interesting. I said, I'm going to be launching this program. I'm going to run a pilot. I'd love for you to test it. As a result, you get it for half price. You'll go through and you'll give me feedback, and that's part of the deal. And to my surprise, I wanted 30 people in the pilot, and 30 spots went. I actually sold 35 in like 2 weeks, with 0 sales page, nothing. Just here's the structure, here's the layer, here's what I'm thinking. I'd gone through quite a bit of thinking process to get to that point, but I was just super stunned that they did it. So after that, I then had about 2 weeks, and I started with the first module. And as I created a module, I released it. As I created the next, I released it on a very simple but ship site. They gave me feedback. It was great. And then I've relaunched it 2 more times. I've actually completely redone the program. I made upgrades the first time, and then I completely redid it in sort of February last year, and then relaunched it, and it was hugely successful. So that's another thing I think about programs, is how you can expand and improve on them, and just through feedback from the community, what I could improve. And I'm kind of doing it again now. So I love upgrading things. I think it's important to keep up to date. And have just released another program to contribute to that program for people who are just starting out with an idea. So there's now another course off the back of that course, and there's a book off the back of this program, which we can talk about as well.
Yeah, and well, I think there's a point that you made there, Natalie, that I really want to underscore, which is, when people registered for the summit, for example, 4 minutes after they registered, I sent them an email and said, hey, quick question. What's your number one concern or question about launching your book and really building out your business and brand? And over 1,000 people sent me emails, and I've tried to respond to almost all of them. But one of the top concerns is like, how do I sell more books? How do I know if my book or my program is going to be successful? What I love about what you've done, Natalie, is you've sort of flipped that whole perspective on its head, and you're like, well, let's make money first, and let's see if there is demand first, and let's get people engaged around the ideas first. Whereas I think conventional logic is more like, well, first I've got to write the whole book, and then I'll start sharing it with people and building up an audience. Or first I've got to design and create a whole training program, and then I'll go out and get people to enroll in it. Do you have anything else to share on how you think about engaging people around the idea first and garnering people's interest and attention before actually putting in the work? And what's your philosophy around that?
That's a great question. 2 things. I realized I didn't answer your last question fully. So when I launched the program, there was the pre-recorded videos and the workbooks and the audios and the transcripts. And then I also had live group coaching for the 12 weeks that it went on, and a Facebook community. So I do think the live component is important. And now it's going more into an evergreen mode. And to come back to this question that you just asked, I just have to say, when I first did that with the Freedom Plan, it's because I learned a really hard lesson, and I spent about 40 hours or more creating an entire course from scratch and then selling it. And it was kind of like crickets initially. I mean, in the end it paid off, but it was just so much work, and I hadn't qualified with my community whether they really wanted that. So yeah, now I do that almost all the time, or I have a very good understanding of my community and what they're asking for. And like you asked in that first question, I mean, that's gold for you. All the answers that you're going to get from that, you're able to create something for that. You're able to now give them something that they value by going, here, I've got the solution, right? So I think understanding regular surveys, asking questions, even jumping on the phone with some of your customers, people who've just bought from you, or people who have a particular challenge, is just absolute brilliant method for mining for gold. So that's how I get most of my ideas now, is people are literally giving me the answers to what they need.
I love that. And, I think there's an important takeaway there as well for everybody watching this, is like, sure, we're here doing an online summit and it is live broadcast and we're reaching, there's an audience for this summit of well over 6,000 people, 6,500 plus. And yet still one of the best ways to get intelligence on what an audience really wants and needs is to do selective sort of sample size from individual people, which is why I took the time to respond to hundreds and hundreds of those emails of people telling me what their number one question is. It's the same reason in my publishing work that I'm spending 3 to 5 hours on the phone on one-on-one calls with prospective authors. And over the course of a few weeks, let alone months and a year plus, the amount of synthesis that you can do from having 100 conversations with individuals about a program, in my case, book publishing, it's given me, at least personally, I'll speak from my own experience and I would love to hear more of yours. It's helped me synthesize what are the common themes, struggles, goals, ambitions through those one-on-one conversations to allow me to best communicate in a one-to-many format and at least believe that I'm hitting the mark, which I think is, again, sort of an inversion of conventional logic of like, you've got to create something first and then get it out there. You've got to get your funnel right. And this whole online marketing mumbo jumbo that quite frankly confuses a lot of people, when it still comes down to personal interactions and understanding what people want on an individual level, and then finding where are all of those like-minded individuals, and let's have them become the audience or the customer base, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But I think it is hard for people to get their head around, because a lot of people are like, well, what if I pre-sell it and 1, it bombs? Or what if I pre-sell it and 2, oh my gosh, people grab it, then what? And my answer to that question is, if it bombs, then it's probably something in your messaging, your marketing. It allows you to tweak for anybody who did buy it. Let's say you get 2 buyers. You can offer them either a refund, or you can say, hey, I want to jump on a call with you and give you an hour of coaching instead, which is actually worth a lot more. So there's always ways to still give value to the clients and customers. And then the second thing, if it goes really well, great. You've now got a rocket under your ass to start producing this awesome thing. And you've got a timeline, and they're going to be cool with you, getting it out, as long as you're very clear with that in the messaging, like pre-order this now and it will be launching on XY date in 2 weeks and 3 weeks. It gives you a bit of wiggle room to start creating.
And what's been your experience of getting that public accountability? And I know this is a big business value of yours, is putting things out there, making declarations, setting goals. How does that play into your own motivation and work ethic? As somebody who I know has other interests, ultimate frisbee, traveling the world, doing fun stuff. Is that a requirement for you to have some type of public accountability to really hunker down and work, or is there something else going on too?
No, I think I'm pretty highly motivated, but for the big goals that seem a little bit more scary or audacious, that I'm like, oh, I might back out of this. That's where I think having what I call the painted picture, and I talk about that in my Freedom Plan program, why it's so important. Because if you have a big vision for your life, business and family relation, put it out there publicly, it's like having somebody else say, hey, I want this to happen for you, makes it just more meaningful, makes it more likely that you're not going to shy away from it. And we're not put on this earth to live a really blasé life, right? To sit in front of the TV on the couch. We can do that anytime when we're old and cheering back on our lives. But right now, right in this moment, we have to make the most of it. So I think it's for those bigger, audacious moments. Like I put in my painted picture, I really wanted to speak at a TED Talk within the next 12 months. It happened before then, which was awesome. And by putting it out there and then talking about it on my podcast, a friend of mine who's a really great speaker then nominated me for a TEDx. So, I mean, just all those things wouldn't have probably come into place had I not put it out there in the first place. That's the bit that I guess is the accountability piece that I really like about it. It's more that people step up and go, hey, I want to make that happen for you.
I like that. And that I think that's really gold, Natalie, because it takes the focus away from, hey, here's my personal big goals and here's the things that I'm going to do. Sure, that's a part of putting it out there publicly, but what it actually does, when you get specific, like in your case, stating that you wanted to do a TEDx talk in the next 12 months, lets other people know specifically what your goals are and be able to quickly say, oh, do I know somebody? Yes, I do. I know this person that runs TEDx talk. Why don't I put them in touch? And it lets people sort of rally around and support your goals, perhaps even more so than it does hold you accountable to working towards them from an individual initiative standpoint. Has that been your experience, or is there some balance between your community rallying to support you and encourage you versus you yourself getting clear on what you want to accomplish and then having the motivation to see it through?
It's a great question. I think it's the premise behind a painted picture is that by getting really clear on what you'd like 3 years from now, but putting it in the present tense makes it a lot more real for you. And I've had lots of people go through my program who put it out there and then went, damn, this stuff works, like it's already happening. So I think it's twofold. It's you getting clear first on what's really important to you, how you want to live your life, what your career, what your business looks like. And then the second part is, now that it's out there, because most people don't want to let other people down, or you don't want to look like a fool, you work harder to make it happen. So therefore then it does happen. It's just an awesome approach, but you have to put in the time and effort first to get really clear on what that is and what you want.
Do you have any tips on that front? And if I'm not sure if it's appropriate here, but if you've mentioned a painted picture a couple of times, or what's your own visualization process like for getting clarity on what you want to accomplish over the coming months or year?
Yeah, great question. So for me, it's actually giving myself some downtime to go away and think about that. And I usually get it when I'm out in nature, when I'm out by the water, where I'm in just places where I can feel very creative and I can let my mind go. And that's when I have some of my best ideas, which is why having holidays and taking time out is so incredibly important for us. And that's often when I start to dream a little bigger, or just think, oh, this is really lovely, I want to do more of this each day. And therefore then I expand that, and I have a pretty good imagination. So then I just kind of expand it into other stuff that I want to be doing. And like sometimes it's when you've just come off a high of something, or maybe you're just having a complete flip on where you're at, or maybe you're having a bit of a downer start to the day, and you're just like, well, why is this happening, and what do I really want, and what can I change, and how can I change my attitude, what outcome could I change? And then it kind of spirals into, ooh, that sounds exciting, what if I follow this thread, where would that take me, what am I really thinking about here? Oh, I didn't realize this is a goal I want to set, or something I want to achieve. So that's kind of how I flip things, or come up with things that expand my imagination and then actually turn them into reality. Make it organic, and that's exactly what it is, but it's things.
I really like that, Natalie, and I think it's one of the reasons why I consider you sort of a kindred spirit, in the sense that, you know, we're right about similar, or at least in Lifestyle Entrepreneur, we wrote about similar subjects. And it's always been my approach too, that I never find the big moment of inspiration or vision sitting at my workstation, sitting in my desk. This is where I accomplish stuff, but it's usually when I'm out, you know, in Death Valley in the middle of nowhere, looking at the sun on the big salt flat, that I'll say, oh, well, there's an idea I hadn't thought of before. Or if I work really hard, like leading up to this summit, I was so just overwhelmed. But then I went to Electric Daisy Carnival with 100,000 people and neon lights and music. And at that moment, like complete separation from the business and planning aspect, I got super excited about the summit. Like going into it, I was like just dead. I was just half dead. And then like having that complete separation from the environment, at least in my experience, it sounds like yours too. So it reinvigorates me and gives me a new perspective on the things I've already been working on, or what I want to do and accomplish next. So I think there's a good takeaway there for everybody too, is like, if you are of the mind that you've just got to grind it out and like put in extra hours at your desk or in your workstation, the marginal return starts to drop off a lot if you're starting to feel burned out and you're in the same environment, in the same position, doing the same things. Just switching something up completely can introduce the new perspective, the new idea that really starts to move the needle. Anything else you want to say on that? Because I know you travel a lot and you come up with a lot of ideas in that process.
I do, and I was going to say the second thing in relation to environment is people. So yeah, just being in a new location or environment is fantastic. And then the second thing is, you've probably seen it, you come off mastermind events, weekends, conferences, I run retreats, and at the end of every single one of those, even though I'm putting them on for other people, I'm always inspired, and I've got new ideas, and I've learned things, and I want to get going. So if it's not change of location, it's change of people that you're with. And obviously hanging out with people who inspire you, who are doing great stuff, is incredibly motivating, and also great for switching up what you may be thinking. So I'm a huge and firm believer in investing in retreats, experiences, learning, and places where you're going to meet people who are doing really great stuff that you can kind of get swept up in their enthusiasm and reinvigorated if you've lost your mojo.
Nice. Yeah. And I'm just thinking, even like at the sort of meta level, you know, I blocked out maybe a month and a half to really focus 100% on the summit. But importantly, after it's all said and done, like I'm going on a 4-day road trip with my dad and I don't have a single call scheduled. So like, instead of just going from like medium intensity to high intensity back to medium, like dropping off to just nothingness for a few days, I think it's important to recuperate and not get burned out and keep motivation. So externally, it looks like you're just going from strength to strength, but from a firsthand experience, there's times of complete separation and relaxation in the midst of everything that's going on. And I mean, I always get that. I always think of that when I see your pictures, whether it's in Bali or some other beautiful place, you know, that you have such a premium on lifestyle and fun and travel. It's just the right way to do business and live life, in my opinion. So cheers on you for that. So what's your experience, maybe circling back to crowdfunding? I know is there still a second campaign going on now for your forthcoming book? Or maybe you can talk a little bit about how you're feeding those learning lessons from Suitcase Entrepreneur into what you're working on now.
Yeah, so I do have a second book plan. So just not to confuse people, after creating the Freedom Plan program, I thought it would also be really neat to then have a book that speaks to some of what you learn in the Freedom Plan, but isn't just the Freedom Plan in the book. Otherwise, that would be not cool for the customers who have invested in it. But it's more talking about that mindset piece behind creating your ideal lifestyle and what does freedom look like to you, and what, you know, how are you going to go about achieving that. So it's more like doing the research on freedom. It's a lot about what I talked about in my TED talk, and using that book as an eye-opener for people and also a feeder back into the Freedom Plan program. So it's twofold there. Also, I wanted to write another book, and this one I wanted to be published by a real publishing house of a lot of credibility, or a hybrid publishing model whereby I'm still in control, but they help distribute it physically as a print book, which is the one thing I think I sort of missed out a little bit more on with the Suitcase Entrepreneur. Quite frankly, I was pretty tired at the end of that tour and I didn't look at all my alternatives. There's only so much you can do when you're doing it by yourself. This time around, I have a bit more of a team. And so I used a completely different crowdfunding platform once again called Publishizer. It's a little bit like Tinder for authors and publishers. So you once again put out your campaign. It's like you write a book, you put it online with your video, and this video was better. And you state like what the book is about, who it's for, why it's different, what you're going to put the money towards. And then the more pre-orders you get, the more you unlock potential publishers. Now, not all of them are publishing houses. Some of them are distributors. They can help you edit and format your book. Some are hybrid publishers, which is where they don't really pay you for a contract, but they will help you market it and put it out there into print distributors and into bookstores through to full publishers. So I really liked the idea because it meant at the end of my crowdfunding campaign, I could use that investment to self-publish, or I could take that money and put it obviously towards the book promotion, but I could also work with a publisher. So I liked that idea. I was giving it a chance. It's a newer platform. They've pivoted recently and I really like their business model. And for somebody who's just starting out, it's a really cool concept to be able to put it up there. They also market it to their list of people who are looking for new books. Once again, you get to invest in somebody's book and be a piece of it. And it worked really well. I wanted 250 pre-orders. I got something like 560 instead. I smashed through my goal. It was like 240% overfunded. And part of that was my community. But once again, I think it was telling a really succinct story on, you know, should this be written, testing it out. Here's what I want to write. Here's who it's for. So once again, I've got this time over 600 and something people who are excited about the book and for when it comes out. I've got a bit of a longer deadline time to write this one because I knew it would be more research intensive. And also because I want to work in with a publisher, and I've had lots of conversations with them since. So what I'm learning is I still love the idea of freedom. It's my favorite value in life. So I think the hybrid publishing or working with a flexible publisher is probably going to be best. But I'm looking forward to changing it up a little this time, getting a bit more support on the PR marketing front, having a bit more support on the editing front, and producing an even better book that has even more of an impact. So I highly recommend Publishizer. There's just more and more cool concepts coming out these days where you don't have to lay everything on the line yourself, and you can get that initial support for your dream project.
It's kind of remarkable, isn't it? On your second book, before it's even written, you already have pre-orders that exceed the average amount of, well, no, not the average amount. Most authors, like 80+%, don't sell over 500 copies. And so I think it's pretty awesome. Yes. Respect that, before you
celebrate that one.
I mean, it's really great. I think it's cool because, it's every author's question. How do I sell more books? How do I, not be part of that 80% that doesn't even sell 500 copies? And here are a few different ways that Natalie shared across Kickstarter or Publishizer to engage with people and get that support and just know that it's locked in. I mean, if you're watching this thinking about beginning or you're in the middle of working on your book, would you feel more motivated if there was 500 people cheering you on, giving you feedback, having a conversation with you as you were writing it, versus trying to just summon the willpower to sit in isolation and write it through to completion? It's kind of a trick question, but if you're watching this and you haven't thought of crowdfunding before, then it may be the appropriate question. All right. So I know that you have had a long day and a big week, perhaps month, year. And I know that you're on a different time zone. I don't want to keep you forever, but what advice would you give for the authors and entrepreneurs that are just at the beginning of their journey now? Maybe if you can take yourself back, whether it was 3-4 years ago, where were you at in your mindset in terms of what you wanted to accomplish and the concerns you had, and what advice would you give, Natalie circa back then?
I think the biggest thing that I see, and it's really sad in some ways, Jesse, and you know this, that something like 90% of people want to write a book and never will. I might be making that stat up, but it's some huge proportion of people who are just never going to get that book out of their head. And the way I think about it, I mean, I'm looking across at a bookshelf right now, and sure, there's freaking millions of books out there, but even if it touches one person's life, even if just one person reads your book, even if that person is just you, to actually write something and publish it is an incredible feeling and an incredible accomplishment. Then to have people actually read it and be inspired by it, to be touched by it, to be moved by it, is something else altogether. And I think it's the reason why we write books, why we read books. So I would just love for people to not think of themselves as not good enough, as not accomplished enough as a writer. You don't even need to be a writer these days to write your own book. Jesse will tell you that. You can record it on audio. You can have a ghost editor do it for you, as long as you have a story, something that people need to know, that they can learn from, that can improve their lives, that can inspire them into action, or potentially maybe, make them think in a different way. Then you need to get that book out there. And I love Stephen Pressfield's Turning Pro, because in it he's talking about this time when he had been sitting on a book and lack of book for ages, and he finally went, I'm never going to write this book if I don't commit to it. So I think he took himself off to a cabin for 3 or 4 months, had a typewriter, started typing, and the shift in attitude for him was not actually sitting there trying to do the work, although that did help, was that he started talking about himself as an author, rather than I'm a struggling writer. So he's like, oh, I'm an author, even though he wasn't yet. And for him, he was turning pro in his own mind before he got there. And that was the shift, and that was the impetus he needed. So start talking about yourself as, yes, I'm writing a book, or I am going to be a published author by the end of this year. And you'll be surprised at how, I think it just kind of lights some fire in your belly and makes you realize it's not going to be that difficult. It's going to be a long process, but just one word after the other. Before you know it, your book will be writing itself, and then there's the exciting process of marketing it. And I'm not going to shy away from the fact that all this is hard work, but it's so worth it. Would you say, Jesse? Like, it's so worth it to hold your book in your hands, and more importantly, to see somebody else holding it in their hands going, really enjoying this book that Natalie wrote. And I'm like, oh, this is so exciting.
Oh yeah, I mean, it is. And it's something that you probably can't really envision if you're still in the writing or the conceptual phase, but the feedback I've gotten from people that have read my book, seeing my book out in the wild, having people take a picture being like, look what I found in the Singapore National Library, and there's like a copy of Lifestyle Entrepreneur. just the fact that once it's out of your head and into the world and into people's hands, you can't anticipate the impact or the response that you're going to get. And for me, that's also been the most rewarding part. Absolutely. And so, as we start to bring this to a close, I know you have something special you put together, something new that you're working on that you want to share here with the Summit audience. I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I'd love to. Actually, it seems really fitting now because we've just talked you out of your head and turning it into a book. And that's, once again, we were talking about earlier, how do I create products or programs or offerings, is because I listen. And the biggest thing that I realized there was a gap with my Freedom Plan program was that a lot of people who went through it who had no idea for a business yet, or too many ideas, they needed a bit more of a leg up. They needed more explanation around how do you take what you know, what you're good at, what you're experienced in, and turn that into something valuable that people will pay you for, and then turn what is that sweet spot that I'm talking about into a viable business. And not just any business, but a business model that suits your lifestyle. So I came up with this program called Idea to Income. So basically how to turn your idea into income in 30 days or less. And I'm literally just launching it today, no lie, because Jesse held me accountable to getting it done for the summit, which is awesome. And it's only $97. It's on special for you guys because I really want you to pilot it and test it and try it. I put a lot of work into it. I know the concepts work. It's how I take a lot of my clients who don't have any idea through to actually building out a really profitable business model. So Jesse, I'm happy for you to share the link with this recording when it goes out, but essentially it is a short, intensive course that is going to show you exactly how to go from idea to income in 30 days. It talks through your self-doubt. It talks through when you have no idea at all, when you have too many ideas, building the right business model that's going to suit your lifestyle, one that gives you freedom, what it takes to start and run an online business. And I do cover off a little bit on the perfect day, which is a smaller version of the painted picture. So we talk about 1, finding the right business ideas, 2, designing your ideal lifestyle, and 3, converting ideas into income in the next 30 days. And I would love for people to check it out.
Absolutely. And I'm going to be sharing that onto the replay page and to the whole Summit audience. And it's exactly what we've been talking about here, the different ways that Natalie's gone from having an idea through to generating income, let alone building a community, engaging with customers, clients, and fans, generating opportunities like having a TEDx talk. All of these things are, part and parcel on this whole process of going from idea to income. And true to form, Natalie came through with a little public accountability, which I was happy to provide with this summit, in terms of having an opportunity for all of you to engage with her, as this is a brand new thing that she's creating. And accordingly, I'm sure she'll be spending a lot of time and energy and focus on everybody that goes through her Idea to Income in 30 Days course. And I'll share that link and I'm excited to see what you've put together with this as well. Is there anything else you'd like to say about going from idea to income in 30 days?
Just that I know that it's going to be immensely helpful for people because I've worked through this through my masterminds, retreats. It's all about getting really clear on your experience, your knowledge, your skill sets, and what you really want to be doing, what motivates you, what lights your fire. We've talked about that today, because there is absolutely no use in building a business from an idea if it's not going to rock your boat, if you're not going to be passionate about it 3, 4, 5, 6 years from now, and if it's not going to support your lifestyle. And I think that's one of the biggest mistakes I see with people is they start down a path with an idea, they kind of don't get it right, and before they know it, they've sort of built a job that doesn't really inspire them and doesn't really pay them well. And so that's what this course is all about, stopping you from doing and helping you to start on an idea that really lights you up and that will actually be profitable and that you can actually make money from in 30 days. So I'm looking forward to it. I'd love to know what people think about it, and I'd love for them to dive in and give it a shot, and maybe one of those things is actually your book.
Nice. That is a great idea. In fact, if you've been sitting on your book idea, not that anybody here on the summit has been sitting on their book idea, then this could be the opportunity and the accountability structure that you need to actually see that through. Maybe you don't write the whole book in 30 days, but what if you had total clarity on what your book would be, had an outline, had a strategy, like Natalie mentioned, on how the book can play into your broader business development and brand building initiatives, would that be a good use of 30 days of your time and only $97 of your hard-earned money? I think it would. And, thanks so much, Natalie, for coming on and being available in a far-flung place and time zone. Do you have any parting words of wisdom or inspiration for the Summit audience?
I would just say that my favorite quote that gets me through on days when I don't think I can do the stuff I want to do is from Yoda, which is do or do not. There is no try. So I hope that people do. Create that book, get it out of your head, get it onto paper, get it into people's hands.
Beautiful, beautiful way to close. Thank you very much. Natalie Sisson, author of Suitcase Entrepreneur, creator of the Freedom Plan, creator of 30 Days from Idea to Income, and just an all-around awesome person. Thanks so much for coming and sharing your knowledge and wisdom and experience on the Summit. And thank you all for joining us on this interview, this training on the Book, Business, and Brand Building Summit. We'll see you on a future video. Take care and talk soon.